everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be reviewing a 2021 release that was one of my most anticipated releases from the first half of 2021, and that is The Blacktongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. So this is a book that has been getting a lot of hype and had been getting a lot of hype leading up into 2021. When I was at the end of 2020 looking up the books, the debut releases or the releases that were not the kind of continuation of series, when I had been looking that up and reading through websites and book review sites, etc., The Blacktongue Thief was invariably one of the books that was at the top of everybody's list for books that you just had to read in 2021. So I was really looking forward to this one. And while my expectations were definitely high, I do feel like I went in with a tempered sense of what I was going to be getting. I don't usually get overhyped for books unless I'm really familiar with the author, unless I've read a lot of their work, and I tend to really love what they write. And for me, Christopher Buehlman was a totally new author. Not only had I not read anything by him before, I hadn't actually heard of him before, which makes sense because after learning a little bit about him, I now know that he had written primarily in the horror genre before this, and this is his fantasy debut, even though he has a bunch of publications under his name. So I haven't read any of his horror books, but if anybody does have any prior experience with his books or his work, then I would love to hear what you think about the other things that he has written. So feel free to leave that in a comment below. But today we're going to talk about The Blacktongue Thief, which, as I said, is his fantasy debut and a book that I was really looking forward to reading. Just to give you a very brief summary, so kind of the same thing that you would get just by reading the cover flap, because this is obviously a non-spoiler review. I'm not going to be talking about any spoilers today. But in this book, we follow the main character of Kinch. And Kinch is exactly what the title says. He is a Blacktongue thief. So he hails from a region of the country known as Galtia, and one of the defining characteristics of the people who live there is an actual black tongue. So he has a black tongue, and he has been trained by the Takers Guild, which is kind of the thieving guild that has roots throughout his country, but kind of all over the continent as well. And they take in promising young men and women and train them in the arts of thievery. So Kinch showed a lot of promise at a young age. He had a very quick tongue, as you find out in this book. He is small, slight, pretty dexterous, and able to get himself out of a lot of sticky situations. So he had all the trappings to make a good thief. So when he was old enough to leave home, he was taken in by this Takers Guild, and he was trained in the arts of becoming a proper thief. Now, one of the disadvantages to joining one of these guilds, and especially for people like Kinch, who do not come from a wealthy family, do not come from nobility, they're kind of looking for the best way to get out of their really sad, poor lives, is that your education when you go into the Takers Guild is completely funded by them. And so by the time you reach the end of your schooling or the end of your training, you end up being in quite a lot of debt. So this is how the Takers Guild functions, is that they train up this next generation of thieves, all while ensuring that they kind of have you exactly where they want you, because you end up owing them enormous sums of money, plus interest, obviously, so you have to make all of that back. So when we stumble upon Kinch at the beginning of this book, he's kind of desperate. He is reaching a payment being due, and if he's not able to make it, then he knows that the interest is going to go up and he's going to be even further behind. So he is trying to find a target so that he can make enough money to go and pay the guild, push them off for another period of time, and kind of live his regular life until the next payment becomes due. And he is, in the very first chapter, he has grouped up with some other thieves of various reputations and backgrounds, and they target a young woman who is walking through the forest. And this ends up being pretty bad luck for Kinch. And this is all, like I said, in the description of the book. But the person that his little group tries to target is named Galva. and she is an Espanthian knight. She is a veteran of the Goblin Wars that have completely overtaken the continent, and he is lucky to get out of that fight with his life intact. And once he attacks Galva, even though he is able to get away, he starts a series of events. He sets a sequence of events in motion that will tie his fate to Galva's. Galva is moving through the forest. She is on the first leg of a quest that she is trying to undertake. And once Kinch's path kind of crosses over with hers, then their fates become intertwined, and that is really where the story takes off. So all of that background history, all of that kind of summary, all comes from the first couple pages of the first chapter. And this is all that we know about Kinch, and we get to see as he moves on his journey and kind of moves through the story. So the setup is fairly simple. It seems like your basic quest-based fantasy. You have people of completely opposite personalities who need to band together and work together. We have Kinch, who is a very foul-mouthed thief, and we have Galva, who is an honorable knight. She regards herself as a handmaiden of the goddess of death, and she is very stoic, very serious, and very determined to succeed in her goals. So that is where the story really takes off. And one thing that you will notice, and that I certainly noticed as soon as I started this book, was the narrative voice. So I think before I talk about anything else to do with this book, I need to talk about the writing style, because I think that that is really where the book stands out the most. And for some people, that is going to be a hit and they're going to really love it. And so then I think that they're really going to love the book. And for other people, it's really, I think, going to wear thin quickly, and they probably will not end up enjoying the book at all. But this is, I think, when literary agents are like talking about what you need to have to get your manuscripts noticed, is what they call the strong authorial or narrative voice. You can put this book down, and the way that Kinch speaks, the way that the narrative flows, sticks with you. You could not mistake this book for any other book in terms of the writing and the style and the flow. This is a very distinctive style of prose. I think that Christopher Buehlman writes quite well. I really enjoyed his writing. It is not flowery. It is not beautiful in the sense of like a Robin Hobbs writing is beautiful, but it was, at least for me, really funny, like bitingly funny. This is a bawdy, lewd, raunchy kind of story. And if you enjoy that type of humor, then I think you'll really enjoy the narration here. I laughed so much when I was reading this. I really, really enjoyed the humor. It was definitely over the top at times, but I like that. I did find, I found that it hit like just the right notes. There's like everything, like so many sexual innuendos, like to poop jokes, to everything. So you need to have like, I don't know, probably a fairly juvenile sense of humor, but that rings true with me sometimes. And it really seemed to fit the character of Kinch. So I thought that it worked quite well. I enjoyed the way that the prose flowed, but it stays steady throughout the entire novel. This book is narrated by Kinch. It is first person. He is telling the story of what has happened to him from some unknown point in the future. So if you see this in a bookstore and you pick it up and you flip through the first couple of pages, if you like the way that the narrative voice sounds, then I think that you'll like it the whole way through the book, because there's not a lot that changes. It is, like I said, very funny. There's a lot of play on words, a lot of puns, and it just really worked for me. So I really enjoyed the writing here. And the writing, as I said, fit the character quite well. And I think that it fit the world quite well as well. So I mentioned when I was talking about the summary, I was talking about the character of Galva, who's kind of our second main character. She is a veteran of these goblin wars. So the world that we are introduced to through the eyes of Kinch is really not a pleasant place. It is a rundown, destitute world that is trying to build itself up off a completely devastating war that has taken place with the goblins. So the humans at the beginning of the story have been victorious in this very long-standing goblin war, but it has taken a horrible toll. There is essentially an entire generation of men and then most of an entire generation of women who had gone off to fight in this war. So basically you had this huge army of men who fought to the death, and then when there were no men left to fight, then the women came forward to fight. And so you also lost out on a generation of reproductive time. So Kinch also talks about how there is not a huge young population, because many of the women who were of childbearing years also went off to fight in these goblin wars and also died or came back hurt or unable to start a family or any of those things. So it has really had this devastating toll on the land. It has had a devastating toll on the economy. It has had a devastating toll on the psyche of the people who live there. And there's a really interesting, you find this happens really early in the story, but someone is singing a song. And Kinch explains that in order to make the song rhyme, you have to say kind instead of kind for mankind. And he makes the comment that no one refers to us as mankind anymore because there is no kindness left in the world. So really you see how far-reaching the devastation from these wars have been, and you see how a character like Kinch can grow up and can come into adulthood in a world like this. And so a lot of his really kind of raunchy humor, a lot of his nihilistic sensibilities, they all make sense in terms of what he has grown up in, the context of the world in which he lives. So I think that while characters like Kinch can sometimes be a little bit difficult, because we've all seen that kind of, like that character who swaggers and is clever, and he likes to say like he has the sharp witticisms but doesn't really care about anything. But I think that in terms of Kinch's character, this really makes sense given the world that he has grown up in and the things that he has seen and done throughout his childhood, adolescence, early adulthood. So I really liked that, and I think that it fit in with that part of the world building really well. In terms of world building, so outside of just setting that main stage and setting that atmosphere for what type of world this really is, Christopher Buehlman does put for it, like for a short book, this is, I think it's just over 400 pages. Yeah, it's like 413 pages. So for a pretty short debut novel, he does pack a fair amount of world building in here. For me, some of this world building felt a little bit superfluous. He has his own currencies, and the currencies change based on the country that they're in. And because this is a quest novel, they travel through several different countries. And so if you want to be up on things, and you have to kind of keep track of which currencies belong to which country and why and what it means. There is a 9-day week as opposed to a 7-day week, and these days of the week have different names than they do in our world. There are different seasons, different months, and I think for a lot of people, this can really build up a world and it can help it feel more immersive. So if you like those kinds of small details in terms of your world building, I think that it's done really well here. I tend to not really care about that. I don't really need the new days of the week or to know what the currency is. I like when there's more focus put on the characters and their relationships, and when we take that page time to develop some of those things. But I know that a lot of people really do. So if you like those minute details that can really make a world seem more vibrant, make it seem brighter, then Christopher Buehlman did a really good job with that here. He also has established a magic system. It seems very D&D based. So they talk about cantrips. They have small spells that they can use that people of kind of basic magical knowledge can use, and they are taught basic magical knowledge with the Takers Guild when they're training to become a thief. But then there are also more complex and intricate styles of magic, and these are really quite soft. We don't get a lot of details about how magic works, what kind of toll it takes on the body. There are magic users that Kinch comes in contact with, and I won't talk about them a lot just because of spoilers. This is a short book, so it's good to discover a lot of that on your own. But we do get to see some kind of middling magic users, and then also some really powerful magic users. There are potions that are used. There are kind of runic magic that is related to markings or tattoos. So there's a lot of different types of magic that comes up. No formal magic system, very little kind of hard magic. It is more of a soft magic, and you just have to take what it gives you. So it can do different things at different times, and you have to be okay with that. It really does feel a lot like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign in terms of the type of quest and the types of foils that happen, the types of messes that they get into, and then the types of magic that they use to get themselves out. And I mean that in a very positive way. I really like that classic feel to fantasy, and that is definitely what you get here, just with that more modern integration of some deeper, darker themes, I guess. But in terms of world building, I thought for such a small novel, it really did do a good job. There's some very basic political maneuvering here. So there's some very basic political intrigue. And I think this is something that's going to get a lot deeper in the subsequent novels. But there is a little bit here. We get to know a little bit, especially in terms of how the war affected the various states, and how the Takers Guild is functioning in relation to the leaders of the various countries. So we do get a little bit of that, but I imagine that that's something that's going to be expanded on a lot more in further volumes. Just to touch on, so we've talked a little bit about the world, and we've talked about the voice, and I guess in terms of characterization, I just want to talk a little bit about Kinch and Galva. So Kinch, as I said initially, is this irreverent, loudmouthed, dirty-minded thief. And we get a lot of surface level interactions from him in the beginning, but as the quest goes on and we get to uncover a little bit of Kinch's backstory, we do start to develop a deeper understanding for him and a deeper understanding of what drives him. As he begins to get to know more people along their journey, as he begins to understand what his companions wish for and what their hopes and dreams are, he does start to open up a little bit. He never loses that sharp edge, and he maintains that facade of not caring about anything in order to get him through his day and in order to get him through the really terrible things that he has to do. But we do get to understand his motivations a little bit more, and we do get to, I think, see a little bit about what drives him. I personally would have liked for Christopher Buehlman to dive a little bit deeper into Kinch, for us to, I feel like we just got we were given like the littlest scraps of what lies underneath, and that made me really intrigued, but I want to know more. So certainly I'm hoping to get a lot more of that in the rest of the books in this series, but I think that he's a very easy character to like. I think that he definitely is more than he first appears, and you do get to see that over the course of the story. The other primary character here, as I've said before, is Galva, and she is the veteran of the Goblin Wars. She's a very stoic character, a very driven, determined character. And because we're getting this story narrated by Kinch, we get his impression of Galva, but we don't, outside of her interactions with other people, we don't get to see a lot into her psyche. We don't get to understand what drives her. And I'm not sure if this will open up into more POVs. I get the feeling that it won't. This feels very much like a Name of the Wind. Like Kinch is telling his story. He's looking back, like Fitz or Kvothe from The Name of the Wind. He's looking back and telling the story of what has happened to him. So I don't really expect it to open up more in terms of POV, but Christopher Buehlman does seem to have a good command over letting the action of the story give us a deeper understanding into the characters. So I'm hoping that as we follow the story more, that we might be able to understand the secondary characters a little better. Kinch and Galva do pick up some other companions along the course of their quest, but I don't want to talk about them a whole lot because of spoilers. So all I will say is that these are very likable characters. They're very distinct from one another. I think that Christopher Buehlman does a great job of giving us characters that we can root for. But for me, I never felt that strong emotional tie for them. I would have liked to have felt a little more deeply for them. I would have liked to have been a little more invested in their story outside of just being companions for Kinch. And that's one of the limitations of a first-person perspective, is that we really get to know our hero. We really get to know Kinch. We get to know him inside and outside. We know his thoughts. We know his hopes. We know his feelings. But we only see the other characters in the story as they are related to him or as they impact him. And that is great in terms of understanding who he is and how these people have changed him. But I would have liked to have known a little bit more about them. So if I do have kind of a small niggling complaint about the book, it would be in terms of those characters. But still highly enjoyable. There was no one that I hated reading about. There was no one that I felt like was completely irrelevant to the plot. So I did enjoy the characters as they came. And there are a couple of animal companions here. So if you enjoy animal companions, then keep your eyes peeled, because there are a couple in here and they are lovely, fantastic. I always love a good animal companion in a fantasy novel. In terms of my overall enjoyment, I really liked this. I don't think I liked it as much as the people who had kind of built it up and given this early hype to it had liked it. When I do a review on Goodreads, which I haven't done yet, I will probably give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really enjoyable. I really, really enjoyed the voice. I really enjoyed the writing, and I really liked Kinch. I just felt that overall this seemed like a novel that was building towards something more. This is a series where I will most certainly purchase the next book as soon as it is released, and I will read it right away because I do want to know what happens, and I do feel attached to Kinch. I really do want to know what happens in his life and how this unfolds, but I wish that I had felt a little more attached to the secondary characters. It very much feels like the first novel of a series. I think that a lot of that depth that I'm looking for in terms of the political intrigue, in terms of the character development is really, I do believe that it's going to come along. I just don't think that it has given me enough to completely blow me away. It is not the 2021 release that I am dying to get the next volume for. It is not the book that has completely swept me off my feet, but I do think it's really enjoyable. And I think that if you're looking for something that is light in, I say it's light in tone. There's a lot of dark things that happen, but Kinch, he is able to cope through humor. One of his defense mechanisms is humor, and he is able to utilize that humor to get through some really bleak times. So if you're looking for a book with some of that irreverent humor, if you want to kind of break up maybe a drier series with something that is light in terms of the writing at the very least, then I think this would be an excellent choice. It's very quick. The pacing is excellent. There are no points that feel like a lull or a dip in the story. It really keeps you moving through the pages, so it's very easy to read. And I think that it is highly enjoyable. So many people have loved this debut, and I think that if any of the stuff that I have talked about has sounded appealing, then you should most definitely pick it up. But that's really all that I have to say for this one. I'm really glad that I read it. I'm glad that I picked it up right away and that I had the opportunity to chat with you guys about it. If anybody else has read it, then please let me know what you thought. Did you like Kinch? Was there anything that you felt this novel did really well, or something that you were looking for that you didn't get? I would love to hear from any of you, and please let me know if you are looking forward to reading it if you haven't read it yet. But I will see you with another video soon. Bye!